you can take ideas that come to you and make them bigger. Usually managers take ideas and make them smaller because they think it's easier to implement. By the time you've implemented, it doesn't mean very much. My father was a professor, so I had a lot of benefit of growing up in a family where education was deeply valued and where my father was always willing to help me when I had a particular problem in school or math problem or something I wanted to couldn't understand. Not everybody has that privilege.
Hi everyone, welcome to Conversation with Kushal. Today we have with us an Indian chartered accountant who went on to become dean at Harvard Business School. He was a gold medalist at IIM Ahmedabad and holds 2 master's degrees, one in statistics and other in economics. And he's also a PhD from Stanford University. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 2021, the 4th highest civilian award in India. On a lighter note, we have also heard that he's a top expert in Africa and he teaches an executive program to Africans on Africa, and he's a Mumbai man. He's none other than Mr. Srikant Datar. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting my invitation. It's a huge sense of honor for me to host you today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Kushal, to be with you, and thank you for having me and for the opportunity to share a few thoughts. So very much look forward to it.
Thank you so much, sir. So first things first, sir, you became the Dean of Harvard Business School in January 2021. It's been around 2.5 years in that journey. I wanted to understand a few things about your amazing experience with Harvard in the last 2.5 years and what has that experience taught you, which you are applying in your day-to-day life today.
Great question, Kushal. So I started as Dean of the Harvard Business School on January 1, 2021. So in the middle of the pandemic. So the first things to do at the school at the time was to make sure how would we navigate it and what would we do to manage around the pandemic. But that was, we all saw it to be a short-term issue. We were, by that time, we could see the early signs of vaccines emerging. And once you have that, then you know that, over a period of time, things will get better. So what I did at the time was, spoke to about 1,000 individuals one-on-one. Anytime someone is doing a new role as the type I was doing, even though I've been at the school for before that for 25 years, it was a new role. It's very good to talk to members of your community and understand it. So I did one-on-one interviews with all the faculty and about 1,000 meetings, small group meetings, less than 5 or 6 people with alumni, students, faculty and staff. And what I learned from those meetings were, by the way, I captured all of it digitally. You may have seen that I teach a course on machine learning and artificial intelligence. So I actually applied some of the techniques that I use in my research to understanding where were different people. By the time you've done your 1,000th interview, you don't remember what happened in your first. So when you capture it digitally, you can actually take away any biases in listening, which I think is a very important learning for me. It was at that time, continues to be during my time as dean. How do you actively listen to opinions that are very different from your own? And then the second thing it does is allows you to consolidate and understand where the community is. And it led to an opportunity for us. I always think of the pandemic as the passageway to Harvard Business School's future, led to an opportunity for us to start thinking about digital and technology and data in more innovative ways and let us create 2 new institutes, one around digital data and design, another one around Institute for the Study of Business in Global Society. And what I learned from that experience is that energy levels aren't fixed in individuals. If they can be inspired and motivated to do more important things, they get more energy. And if you, if it's a ho-hum, kind of existence, then you lose energy. And so it was also a way for us to energize our community. Because the mission of the Harvard Business School is to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. And we had, of course, because prior to the pandemic, focused heavily on leaders who came to Harvard Business School, the MBA program here, as well as executive education. and suddenly this whole digital opportunities enabled us to now reach individuals who would never set foot on Harvard Business School campus on their own. And yet the content of the school, which we believe is so important to train managers to think differently and to have transformational experiences, could now be shared much more broadly. So it was around listening actively. It was around how do you energize people. And of course, another important skill, I think, is bringing clarity when there's a lot of ambiguity, because you invariably will get very different sets of opinions, and then you have to opinions are understood, but eventually provide some amount of clarity. And then the last point I would make there is what I learned was, if you have the kind of community we have, amazing alumni, staff, and students at Harvard Business School, you can take ideas that come to you and make them bigger. Usually managers take ideas and make them smaller because they think it's easier to implement. By the time you've implemented, it doesn't mean very much. So another thing I learned is, when you have a community like this, take an idea, make it bigger, make it more inspiring, get them to think more innovatively.
Right. In fact, I can resonate with this completely. So I was speaking to a lot of candidates from the MBA batch of Harvard Business School last week, just to understand how is the US education system very different from the Indian one. And I was just mesmerized by the responses which I got from them. Some of them, like, they were mentioning about the case-based system which is there in Harvard. Like, every subject has a case-based system. And even there are a lot of sessions and events with various startup entrepreneurs and founders who have done big in their lives. That gives a very good exposure, is what they were also saying.
Yeah. No, I think the case-based system of education, of course, also one that I'm biased in favor of, not only because of Harvard Business School, but because I went to IIM Ahmedabad, and so we studied by the case method there. It's a unique and superb way of learning. And when I talk to our alumni, they tell me that type of learning, and of course, about the case method at Harvard Business School, that type of learning allows you to do these things that I was just describing: active listening, yet having to decide, yet trying to provide some clarity in that ambiguity, and thereby allowing you to think differently, to think more innovatively, imaginatively, creatively. And the other thing that they always tell me, the alumni, about the case method, is that when you hear these different opinions, because I still remember my time at IIM Ahmedabad, I was always thinking, when I walked into a class, having prepared for it, that I knew what the correct answer to the case was. And then you heard amazing comments from your classmates, from whom you learn a lot, because you suddenly appreciate that I actually didn't have the right kind of thinking at that time. There's a different point of view that needs to be understood. And from that emerges an even better way of understanding a particular phenomena. The other thing it does, I think, is allow you to see the world that is to come much more clearly. When you listen to lots of different opinions, your ability to understand where things might go or what might happen becomes much greater. And when that happens, you, of course, have the great benefit, whether you're making an investment decision or you're developing strategy or you're trying to think about new businesses that you might want to develop. This ability to have some foresight, to see forward, is amazingly helpful. And it comes from this approach of trying to understand different points of view.
Right. So what do you think are some of the upcoming trends in the education system, especially after the Edtech boom, which happened during the COVID pandemic? What do you see are like some upcoming trends in this entire industry for the next decade or century?
What we'll never know for the century, but at least, Kushal, for the next couple decades, I think, we will learn, I believe very firmly, we will learn how to combine the best of in-person education and online or distant education in the best possible way. There are I'm still of the opinion that when you meet somebody and interact with them individually, the empathy you get, the understanding you get is very deep, much better. Leadership skills, I think, require a good understanding of it. So that's a very important part of in-person. But there's a lot of benefit from a digital. I'll give you two very good examples. One is that when you're trying to study technical material, I teach a course, as I said, in machine learning and AI. So I will teach about neural networks and random forest models and models that aggregate different models together, so-called ensemble models. And each student might have a different pace and a different way of understanding these particular approaches, which, of course, if you're in class, you're sort of following one way. But when you're doing it online in the most interactive way possible, you can actually do it so that you're able to unlock the learning difficulty that someone might have in step 1 or step 7 or step 10, and allow them to then personalize their learning to because you can personalize learning much more in the digital world than you are when you have 70 people together. So that's an example where, you know, getting some of the ability of the digital technologies to help improve student understanding will be enhanced. I think on the other side, of course, when you're having discussions and debates and this learning and active learning that I was just describing earlier, the ability to interact with someone in a powerful way with lots of people, again, can be done online. We have certainly started developing capability to do that as well. We have something called the live online classrooms where we do that. But there will be, therefore, room for thinking about what every time we think about content, how do you think about the best way to deliver that content? Some of that might be digitally and some of that might be in person. So I'm still of the view that this combination of trying to look at the strengths of each is going to be an important thing for us to still discover, figure out going forward. And of course, as we know, with the trend towards remote work, these become all important questions. You know, people are struggling with, do you work completely online? You're talking about education, but now when it comes to work, do you work completely online or do you come back to the office? And how are we thinking about these hybrid models that are developing, and how does that help in terms of mentoring and developing of people? Same things apply in education as they're going to apply in the workplace. How do you combine the best of both?
Right. I completely agree. In fact, I myself, as an Edtech founder, I am facing this dilemma, like, since, let's say, 6 months or so, where a lot of people have like advised me that if I am doing something online, it is scalable, but people don't have value of online because they can watch it as per their own convenience. In case of offline, there's a peer-to-peer learning, as you rightly said. In the case-based system, there's a proper network. But in offline, again, it's not a scalable model if you want to reach masses and if you want to access a lot of other people. So this is always a dilemma which exists in a founder who is building something in the education system. And I completely agree that a hybrid of both should be something which is a best solution for this.
So it is very interesting, Kushal, that you mentioned that. So if you look at what, you know, we have a whole online activity called Harvard Business School Online, HBS Online. And what we try to do is precisely address the question that you are asking. So it is taught asynchronously. So for instance, I have a course on HBS Online on design thinking and innovation. I'm not there at all it's a 25 hour course, 7 modules, let's say 2-3 hours each. And I'm not there at all in this course, if anyone taking the course. But what we have done is try to combine elements of online and and peer-to-peer. So while you study the content, because it's again case-based, while you study it, you know, on your own, you actually come together at a particular time every week with your classmates to discuss what the issues are. So you're trying to not make it a lonely individual experience. Yes, prep is important. We always did that. Even in our cases, you prepared on your own, but then you came back and actually discussed that, you know, as a group. And that's what we're trying to combine online as well. So how do you combine the best, even when you're doing it online? How do you think about participant-centeredness? How do you think about the student at the center of the learning activity? How do you think about peer-to-peer learning? How do you think about feedback mechanisms? How do you think about different ways of understanding a particular problem, which only comes when you put different people together? And that's what we're trying to do. And precisely because it is asynchronous, so it is trying to combine elements that we learn and benefit from discussion in an asynchronous way, it becomes scalable. So each year, I don't know, I have 1,000, 1,500 students who take the course. And of course, I'm not there in it at all, but it is done by case method. And it's a very difficult thing to get correct because it's the hundreds of years of experience that Harvard Business School has to figure this out. But your point is very well taken, Kushal. That's what we try to do in HBS Online. How do you get peer-to-peer learning even if you're online?
Right. That's very well said, sir. I think this will also inspire a lot of founders who are building something in the education system just to understand how do you incorporate that. The next question is on artificial intelligence and machine learning, which you are an expert at. And I'm amazed by the fact that a chartered accountant, I myself have done chartered accountancy. You also teach design thinking, innovation, AI, ML. That is something which is commendable. And you had mentioned in one of your HBS reunion that technology and people should be thought as two sides of a coin. The more you build technology, the more you have to think about what is the impact that is going to happen on people. So I wanted to understand, how do you think the artificial intelligence space will span over the next decade again, especially after tools like ChatGPT are now born and are automating a lot of tasks?
No, it's a very important question, and one that we always should pay a lot of attention to it. I'm often asked, why it is that that particular point that you made is so prominent in certainly my thinking and certainly our thinking. And I always mention that it is not an original idea. It's not my idea that I think about it in this way. And actually the real inspiration from it actually comes from Gandhiji, because Gandhiji's 7 deadly sins, the one that I was really pointing out in that particular quote was science without humanity. And as just as bad as commerce without morality, just as bad as knowledge without character. And you can see all those three apply in the question you're asking. The other 4 deadly sins are all very important too, but may not be directly relevant to your particular question at this point. So as we continue to develop these tools and these models, which are certainly, I think, going to do 2 things. They're certainly going to improve productivity, and we know generally that has helped in improving human welfare over long periods of time, and allow us to be more innovative. Both are possible, I think, with these tools that we are talking about, whether it is just predictive AI or generative AI. Both the tools, I think, will be very important in those respects. And the world has an endless supply of problems. If we continue to be more productive, we'll solve more of the world's problems and make people better, more people better off as a result of this improvements that will occur. The transition will always be very challenging and always very difficult, as it invariably is. But unlike some of the other, if you just think about the Industrial Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution or any of the other economic steps that occurred, they occurred over longer periods of time. This is happening very, very quickly. When it is happening very quickly, 2 problems will always be there, and therefore we must think about it extremely carefully. One will be around the pace. So what happens while the move is going? Long term, I'm very bullish about it. Short term, you're always wondering about what impact it will have. And the second is, how do you make sure that these people issues, and by that I mean ethics and bias and privacy and all the things that we care deeply about, are never ignored in this particular developments. So I think there are always 2 ways in which these things happen. One is through regulation. I obviously think that at some point there will be some of that will come. But the other is also through our own ethics and values, and trying to, in companies, build systems. And of course, we study this a lot when we study our chartered accountancy. You think about internal control systems, and you want people to be creative and innovative and entrepreneurial, but you put control systems. You don't want people to do the wrong things. So what would be the right control systems? I think the world is still trying to figure that out. But and I'm of the view that if we can almost self-regulate it, think about what are some of the issues that we should think very deeply about in these particular topics, we should. Of course, if that works, that's great. I know for sure that at some point, there is already talk going on about what the regulations need to be about this area. But again, I think overall, and of course, by the way, in the educational spaces, you can imagine there are lots of questions being asked about the positives about this and negatives. Both are real questions. Both are important questions. We shouldn't just think about the one side of the benefits without thinking about what the challenges are. But it'll be some time before we figure that out.
Right. And especially in the education system, do you think AI can be used in a very positive manner? And if yes, like what are some of the artificial intelligence, machine learning things that can be used in the education space as a whole?
Well, the two that, one of our graduates, Salman Khan of Khan Academy already talks about, a beautiful TED talk for those who are interested in seeing it, about how it will impact education. And I'm very much in the same line of thinking as Sal is. One, that it will democratize the ability for people to have access to amazing tutoring, if you will, that they otherwise would not have had access to. So, you and I are among the lucky ones where we were born was such that my father was a professor. So I had a lot of benefit of growing up in a family where education was deeply valued and where my father was always willing to help me when I had a particular problem in school or math problem or something I wanted to couldn't understand. Not everybody has that privilege, and everyone should. It's the best way to make sure that more people will have opportunity to quality education. And as Sal says, this will allow everyone to have a private tutor. You don't understand something about a distributive property in algebra, it can explain to you what it is, and you don't have to have any, don't have to be as lucky as I have been, and as probably you have been, Kushal, in what we've been able to, the benefits we had. The second is that it'll allow faculty members to have a teaching assistant. So you can imagine that the benefit will come from the students having a tutor and the faculty person having a teaching assistant. And therefore, once again, the level of education increasing, which, we know generally over history always has positive benefits to society. So that I see as the real benefit and power of particularly these newer tools that are coming, while understanding the challenges, while understanding all the issues that we are worrying about. Will people learn properly? Will they take shortcuts? Will they appreciate the struggle that is involved when you're learning? All of those are important issues that we've got to think about. But the big benefit is that extremely children who never had the kind of opportunities that you and I had suddenly now have the ability to learn in ways that were unimaginable
Right.
a couple of years ago.
Right. Since you mentioned about your father, I had also watched one of your podcasts where you mentioned that one thing which your father has taught you is that the best gift you can give to someone is knowledge. And I think you are absolutely doing that by doing these podcast episodes. And like that is something which we are very grateful to you for.
Oh, thank you, Kushal. And I always will remember my father when I do these things, because that's what he always said. He said there is no
Yes.
bigger gift. He was a faculty professor himself. No
Correct.
bigger gift you can give another person.
Right. In the interest of time, just one last question, sir. This is like a question which I asked to every guest. So this is a tricky one. If you were in the shoes of Kushal Lodha and you were interviewing Mr. Srikant Datar, what is that one question which you would like to ask Mr. Srikant Datar towards the end of the interview?
No, I think you have covered the most important ones, Kushal. I did my commencement speech this year I did a commencement speech last year on 3 topics. It's all around leadership, I think, at the end that, you asked me that at the very start. it's all about leadership. And what I said in the 22 commencement speech was that leaders will have three important things to do in their as they are leading organizations. They need to enthuse organizations, so create a sense of inspiration and motivation. They need to enable those organizations to function. By the way, I did talk there about creating the right culture and the right systems and the right controls, because when you're about to do the third, which is empower, you have to have those things in place. You must enthuse, you must enable, you must empower. And I think I would say that today those become very important leadership traits going forward. And then this year, I spent the commencement speech on three other attributes that I think are important in the world to have, broadening it out a little bit. One is active listening. So how do you listen to views that are very different from yours, absorb them, appreciate them? You may not agree with it at all, but how do you absorb and appreciate it? Second is, how do you do and thinking? We're very good at or thinking, this or that, but how do you combine it and do and thinking? And so that's a way of trying to think about how do you combine different ideas to make an idea even bigger or better. And the third is to act courageously. In a world that is changing, you can spend all your time doing active listening and thinking, but that's not good enough. At the end, you must take some kind of action. So the question I would have asked, which you already did, but to summarize, would have been on leadership qualities that I think are important in today's world.
Thank you so much, sir. This was very, very good, and I am sure everyone's going to get inspired. Thank you for your time. It was an absolute honor to talk to you. I hope I could do justice to your time as well.
Absolutely, Kushal. Thank you very much. Good luck with everything you're doing, and keep at it. Keep doing all the good things that you are. We all at the end of the day have only one goal, which is to leave the world in a better place than the one we found it. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much, sir.